I loved lamination. I wanted to laminate all kinds of things. It began with the Magic School Bus and the realization that the characters I loved, Miss Frizzle, Liz, the bus, were created by someone. Somebody, somewhere, told Magic School Bus stories that came to life. Of course, what I wanted to be was an animator, but for some reason, my parents never corrected me. I thought it was cute. I love stories. I always have. Over time, however, my appreciation for stories has become a passion for storytelling. At 6, I wanted to be a laminator. At 10, I wanted to be a photographer. At 13, a writer. At 15, a journalist. And at 18, I'm headed off to film school. As I have grown and evolved, so have my tastes and interests. But the common thread uniting them has always been story. When I registered for senior project, I knew what I wanted to do: tell stories. I decided pretty early on, however, what I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to do anything related to film, photography, or animation. I am a visual person by nature, and any kind of visual project would allow me to stay in my comfort zone. I didn't want that. Senior project is an opportunity to try something new, and I wanted my project to reflect that. So, I eliminated the visual component, and this was what was left. Me. Talking. Talking. I like talking. In fact, I would go so far as to say I'm good at it. Maybe better at it than most people. I sure do it a lot. Definitely more than most people. But I knew talking wasn't an idea for a senior project. Talking into a microphone, however, that had potential. Last year, the Academy debuted its student podcast, Our Own Academy. Simply put, a podcast is a radio show that is available for download online. The Academy's podcast last year was a show that featured a handful of seniors talking about the current goings-on at the school. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell the story of the Academy. I've spent my entire life listening to public radio in the car with my dad. I have particularly fond memories of the boisterous call-in show Car Talk, which features a pair of brothers doling out humorous advice that is only ostensibly about cars, and the brilliant, incisive interviews of Terry Gross on her show, Fresh Air. Over the last few years, however, I've been able to return the favor by getting my dad hooked on my favorite show, Public Radio International's program, This American Life.
What's This American Life in our class? Each week on our show, of course, we choose a theme and bring you different kinds of stories on that theme. Today's show, No Map. Stories of people struggling through situations where there were no guideposts or precedents.
It's brilliant. It's also a format I felt I could emulate. I wanted to move the podcast away from anecdotal conversations and towards detailed personal narratives. To do that, I needed to change the format. The theme segment approach of This American Life seemed perfect. I wanted to tell small, detailed stories that would put larger experiences into an emotional context. I immediately began brainstorming themes. In less than an hour, I had somewhere between 20 and 30 ideas. Many, many more than I could actually make into episodes. I quickly began honing in on ideas with the most potential, and I went into production as soon as I could. In the fall, with the help of my brother, I completed my first recording. I interviewed Reverend Chuck Blair about his experiences at the Academy. It went brilliantly. He was interesting and insightful. I could not have asked for a better interview. It was only when I got home and listened to the recording did I realize anything went wrong. The microphone hadn't picked up any voice but mine. All the great and funny things he had said were lost. I learned quickly that there's more to creating a show than simply talking into a microphone. That microphone, it has to be on. I spent the next few months teaching myself more effective ways to record. I I never perfected the technical aspects of my project, but an incident like the Mr. Blair interview never happened again. I know now that I set out to do more than I was capable of. Initially, I planned on doing 5 episodes, a goal that, with the assistance of my mentor, I realized was overly ambitious. My mentor, Terry Worley, was good at that, reining me in to help me create achievable, realistic goals. I have always struggled with schedules and effective project planning. I wanted a mentor who could help me overcome that. Terry stood out from the very beginning. She is excellent with calendars, problem solving, and motivating, because before she retired, she was a project planning executive at Coca-Cola and Georgia Pacific. She was perfect, except for one thing. She lives in Atlanta. Senior project students need to meet regularly with their mentors, and a weekly 600-mile commute was out of the question. But after much consideration, I still felt like Terry was the right choice for me. So I approached Mr. Boyce. I had prepared myself for him to object to the distance, but it wasn't the distance that was the problem. It was the fact that we were relatives. Terry is my dad's older sister, my aunt. Senior project students are advised against having mentor relationships with relatives because it is sometimes difficult for the participants to maintain perspective in a business-like relationship with someone they are close to. But again, Terry was perfect. I barely knew her at all. Aside from a handful of family reunions and the occasional wedding, I have rarely seen her. This project would be an opportunity for me to get to know my aunt. Over the course of my project, we developed a good relationship. Every one of our Thursday phone meetings included a chat about her life, about mine, about Atlanta, about Bernathen, and eventually, of course, my project. From the very beginning, she helped me overcome my problems with scheduling, tendency towards overexerting myself, and my fear of recruiting. This project depended on the participation of other people. I needed their time and energy for my project to be a success. Having to rely so heavily on other people made me incredibly uncomfortable because, well, I'm a control freak. I'm a control freak perfectionist, to be precise. I like to produce every little detail of everything that I do. But for this project, I wanted to tell other people's stories. In order to do that, they needed to tell me their stories, which meant other people were in charge of my little details. When I pushed record, I was no longer in control. I had to trust that the people who agreed to share their stories with me were going to give me the kind of content that I needed. In the end, however, my fear of interviews was just that, a fear. Interviews were actually my favorite part. I loved listening to other people tell me about their stories. By mid-March, I had completed the task of gathering all the raw material I needed for my first episode. I was ready to begin editing, a process that required a lot more time and energy than I had initially anticipated.